and then they realize their mistake and they retract. But someone apparently didn't hear about it. And after Beis Din retracted, he went ahead and he ate chaylev anyway. So bein shehiviu kaparasin, bein shelo hiviu kaparasin, v'halach be'as al pihen. Regardless of whether Beis Din brought their atoning bull or not, someone went after they retracted and ate chaylev. So Rabbi Shimon poter, v'Rebbe Elazar omer safek. So Rabbi Shimon says it's no different from whether he ate the chaylev before they retracted or whether he ate it after. He's not personally liable. Rabbi Eliezer says, no, I hold that there's some aspect of personal liability and some aspect of innocence. And therefore, because it's a safek, sort of goes in both directions, he has to bring what's called an asham talui. He has to bring a korban, but not a regular korban chatas, but a korban asham that is brought in cases of doubt, when a person is not sure whether he committed an aveira or not. So ezehu safek. So explain this to me. What is the aspect of safek involved? So yashav lo besoch beiso chayev halach lo lemedina sayam poter. So the Mishnah further clarifies, if he was at home when Beis Din retracted, and as we'll see, there was a possibility of him finding out the information and he neglected to, so therefore he has to bring a korban asham. If, however, he was at a town on the road, in Medina Sayam, in a faraway place, when Beis Din retracted, then there was certainly no way of him finding out, and therefore he's no different from if he had eaten chaylev before Beis Din retracted, and therefore he's totally potter. Omer Rabbi Akiva, Moda ani bazeh shu karov lepotur min hachova. And Rabbi Akiva says, I actually agree that there is such a distinction to be drawn, and that when a person is in Medina Sayam, he's much closer to being potter completely than having any sense of liability. So Amar lo ben Azai, Maishna zemin hayoshev beveso. So Ben Azai challenges that, and he says, Rebbe, why should there, listen, if they've already retracted, and therefore you're telling me that when he's home, he's chayev, why should it be any different if he's on the road? In both cases, Beis Din is already retracted, he should be chayev to bring his own korban. So Rabbi Akiva responds, Shahayoshe beveso efsher hayalo lo sheyishma, v'zeh lo hayalo efsher sheyishma. The answer is because when he's at home, he's within the Jewish community. There was always the possibility of him inquiring and finding out, is any news. But when he's in Medina Sayam, there's no Jews nearby, so then there's really total innocence involved. We'll get further clarity as we go through the Gemara. Horu Beis Din lakor es kol haguf. Now we go to a totally different subject, which is, what is the nature of Beis Din's dispensation? When they instruct us to be over an aveira, what is the scope of that aveira? So if they tell us that to completely uproot an entire mitzvah in the Torah, so for example, Amru ein nida b'Torah, ein Shabbos b'Torah, ein avodas kol chavim b'Torah, harei elu piturin. The three examples, they say there's no longer hilchos nida, no longer hilchos Shabbos, no longer hilchos avodah zarah, there's no longer an issue of idolatry. So in these situations, as we'll see, they have to only partially uproot a mitzvah, but if they totally uproot a mitzvah, so the Torah does not hold them liable to bring a bull when they discover their error. Now, interestingly enough, this part of the Mishnah does not address the personal liability of those who listen to Beis Din. It's only addressing the liability of whether Beis Din has to bring a par to atone for their instruction. We would assume that regardless of whether Beis Din is liable to bring a par or not, an individual who acts upon Beis Din's instructions would still be potter, but it's not clear from the Mishnah. Horu levatel mikzas ulakayim mikzas harei ilu chayavim. It's only when Beis Din gives you an instruction that they say there's still a mitzvah, but this part of the mitzvah no longer applies. So that's where the Torah says they have to bring a par. So Ketzad, so give me an illustration. So Amru yesh nida b'Torah aval habo al shomeres yom keneged yom potter. Yesh Shabbos b'Torah aval hamotzi mirishus hayachal l'rishus harabim potter. Yesh avodas kol chavim b'Torah aval hamishtachave potter harei elu chayavim. So the three examples, let's say hilchos nida. It's still forbidden to be intimate with a nida, but a shomeres yom keneged yom is mutter. Now what is that? When a woman is not expecting to menstruate, she is called a zava if she has a menstrual flow. But what if she only has a flow for one one day. It's not a constant flow, just she has a very short flow. So there the Torah states that V'safrala, all she has to do is count one day. She has to just wait. If she only bled for, let's say, a few minutes, then the following day she has to be abstinent from her husband, and if there's no further bleeding, that night she can go to the mikveh. We don't paskin this way as a matter of course. It's not halacha l'maisa, but I'm saying that's the Torah law. So let's say they paskin when a woman is regularly menstruant, so then you can't be intimate with her. But if she's shomeres yom keneged yom, as long as she's not bleeding, it's okay. She doesn't have to wait that day and go to mikveh afterwards. That's an example of where they uproot only a component of the mitzvah of Hilchos Nida. The example with Shabbos, they say all laws of Shabbos apply except Hotza'ah, carrying from inside to outside and vice versa, is now permitted. Or a third example is, there's still a prohibition of Avodah Zarah, but you're allowed to bow down to a statue. So in all of those cases, they've maintained the aspect of the mitzvah, but uprooted one component of the mitzvah. So in that situation, that's what the Torah was addressing when it says that they have to bring a par to atone. Shenemar v'ne'elam davar v'lo kol haguf. Because the Torah says that the matter is hidden from them, and that word davar implies only a portion of the mitzvah, but not the entire mitzvah. We'll get clarity as we go on. Gemara now says, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, my time in the Reb Shimon, hol u'virshus based in hu osa. What's Reb Shimon's reasoning for saying that even if a person eats the chaylev after based and retracted, he's still innocent, he's still patur? Because he was acting still based on Beis Din's instructions. He just didn't get the news that they retracted. And therefore, he's no different from if he had eaten chaylev before they retracted. Ika da Amri, Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Rav, Amar Haya Reb Shimon, Kol hara sheyatza berov tzibur yachid ha'osa osa patur lefi shelo nidna hara ela lahavchin ben shogeg lemezid. This is really just a different phraseology, but it's the same idea. That if the news proliferated throughout most of the Jewish community, that it's permitted to eat chaylev, for example, and this guy went ahead and ate chaylev even after Beis Din retracted, he's going to be patur. Why? Because the whole point of the Beis Din's instruction is to distinguish between a person who's acting on his own volition versus acting upon the instructions of Beis Din. The language is a little bit difficult. I'm just trying to be concise. But the bottom line is it's the same idea. The point is that since he acted based on the Beis Din's instructions, not based on his own volition, he's off the hook. Meisvei. Let's raise now a contradiction. Par helim davar shel tzibur u'seir avodos kochavim batchila goyven aleim divrei Reb Shimon and Reb Yehuda Omer mitrumas halishka ein boyin. So there's a brisa that says that when the Beis Din has to bring a par to atone for a faulty instruction, or if they instructed the people that it's okay to worship Avodah Zarah, so that's also a faulty instruction, but the korban is different. Instead of bringing a par, a bull, they have to bring a goat to atone. In both of those cases, where does the money come to purchase the bull or the goat? So Rabbi Shimon holds that it comes from public collection. They go from city to city and they ask people for donations. They calculate how much it's going to cost and they have everyone contribute a small amount. And Rabbi Yehuda disagrees and it says it comes from the community chest, from the Trumas Halishka that was already collected before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Now the question is on Reb Shimon, Amai, Kaven, Degavi Lahu, Havalei Hoda. Now, according to Reb Shimon, the reason why a guy is off the hook even after Beis Din retracted is because he didn't know. That's what he's going to say. But according to Reb Shimon, of course he knows, because as soon as Beis Din retracts, they send out a collection to collect money. So how could he not know? He got a knock on the door saying, we're collecting for a mistake that the Beis Din made, got to pay up. So of course he knows. So Ibais Ema Kagon Shagavu Stam, the Ibais Ema Kagon Delo Havalei B'masa. So first two answers are either when they made the collection, they didn't tell what they were collecting for. They just said, we're representatives of the Sanhedrin and we're making a collection. And they didn't tell them why. So that could be one answer. The second answer is because he was out of town the day when they came knocking on everyone's door. And another answer is V'ibais Ema Rav Keidach Tana Saver the Tanya Ibcha Batchila Govin Landivir Rabbi Yehuda Reb Shimon Omer Mitrumas Halishka Ein Boyin. It could also be that Rav, who explains Reb Shimon, goes according to the other version of the Brisa, which switches the opinions. That according to Rabbi Yehuda, they go door to door collecting, and according to Reb Shimon, they collect from the Trumas Halishka, so therefore no one has any way of knowing. Okay, Tanya, Now this brisa is just really an elaboration of our Mishnah. Rabbi Meir Mechayev, Reb Shimon Poter. Rabbi Meir says that after Basin retracted, if a guy goes ahead and eats chaylev, he's totally chayiv a regular korban chatas. Reb Shimon Poter, that's our Mishnah. Reb Shimon says you're poter. Rabbi Eliezer Omer Safek. Rabbi Eliezer says it's a Safek because there's some level of liability, and so therefore he brings a korban asham. And Mishum Sumchas Amru Talui. And according to Sumchas, they say in his name that it's Talui, that the matter is suspended. Now what does that mean? What's the difference between saying Safek and Talui? So Rashi explains in the Gemara, this will become clear from the Gemara. Talui means that he does not bring any korban. We don't have any way of knowing whether he's personally responsible or not. But it does not rise to the level of where he has to bring a korban asham for a doubtful sin. Because as we'll see, it works like this. When does a person have to bring a korban asham when he's not sure if he committed a sin? It's when, let's say, we put 2 pieces of fat on the table, and a guy picks up one of the pieces of fat thinking that it's kosher, and he eats it. Later on, he's told, well, did you know that one of those 2 pieces was chaylev? Well, which one? We don't know. We don't know which one was chaylev, but we know that there was definitely chaylev on the table when you were eating. And I don't know whether I ate chaylev or whether I ate shuman. In that situation, I have to bring a korban asham. Why? Because I know that there was introduced to this system definite isser. There was actual isser in the system in which I was participating, and therefore, because there was isser and I just don't know whether I partook of it or not, I have to bring a korban asham. But here, there's no real isser in the system, because what we're dealing with here is a person's mentality. What is he aware of and what is he not aware of? Is he aware that Beis Din retracted, and is he not aware that Beis Din retracted? We cannot say that we can look objectively outside of the person and say that there's something usser that he's dealing with. Okay? And for that reason, Sumcha says it's totally talui. It doesn't rise to the level of a korban asham, and he just doesn't bring anything. Now, let's unpack all of this. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, asham talui ika beinai. And that's where Rabbi Yochanan says that the difference between Rabbi Eliezer and Sumchas is whether you have to bring a korban asham. Amar Reb Zera mashal de Rabbi Eliezer lamaha davar doime laadam she'achal safek chaylev safek shuman v'nodolo shemevi asham. That Rabbi Eliezer would compare this situation to a person who's not sure whether he ate chaylev or shuman, and he discovers that he might have possibly eaten chaylev. There we say that he has to bring a korban asham. V'lo mibai laman do'amar tziboy ma'isi de mefarsam amilsa. Ela afilu lamando amr basin mevian de lo mefarsam amilsa ihavul shal havu amrin lei. And by the way, his level of culpability, of responsibility, is there. There's 2 different opinions as far. We saw this the other day. There's 2 opinions as to who has to bring the bull, the atoning bull. One opinion is that the tzibor, the community, has to bring it, and the other opinion is that the Sanhedrin has to bring it. Now, where is there greater publicity in the community? When the community has to bring the bull, or when Beis Din has to bring the bull? No, there's more publicity when we as a community have to bring the bull. Everyone knows about it. It's our korban. So not only does he have the responsibility to bring a korban asham according to the opinion that the public has to bring the korban, but even according to the opinion that the Sanhedrin alone has to bring the korban, where it's not as public, he still has to bear some level of responsibility. Why? Because had he inquired, he would have eventually figured it out that Beis Din had retracted. And so therefore it rises to some level of liability. Amar Rabbi Yossi bar Abin v'tema Rabbi Yossi bar Zvida mashal de Sumchas lamad davar doma. Now let's explain Sumchas by analogy. So we explain Rabbi Eliezer by analogy. It's like you're not sure whether you eat chaylev or shuman. And according to Sumchas, that you don't bring a korban asham at all. How does he look at it? La'adam shehevi kaparaso ben hashmashos safek mi ba'od yom niskaperlo safek mishachashecha niskaperlo she'ein mevi asham talui. He says in Sumchas's case, there's no definite isser that's been performed, and there's not even a possibility of isser that's been performed. There was never any isser in the system that he's dealing with. We're dealing with a person who had to bring a korban chatas for a sin he had committed. He brings his animal to the temple right before it gets dark. And the animal is brought as a korban. And it's not clear whether the animal was offered on the mizbeach before nightfall or after nightfall. If it was offered before nightfall, the korban is kosher. And he's yotzei his korban chatas. If it was brought after nightfall, it's an invalid korban and he would have to repeat it. In this situation, where there's been no introduction of something usher into the system, it's just a suffix whether his action was efficacious or not. So there he doesn't bring an asham talu, he doesn't bring a korban asham. And that's what this is like as well. The only issue is what is in his mind. But there's no real chaylev out there. So velomi bayi lamando amar based in mevian, velo ifarsam milsa. Ella afilu lamando amar tzibur mevian de ifarsam milsa, vavu amrin lei, dahacha kesafik mi be'on safik mi chashachashecha, yishal lo ashkachinish de mishayale. And the Gemara says, in Sumchas's exemption from a korban is true not only according to the opinion that the Sanhedrin alone brings the par, in which case there's very little publicity, but even if you hold that the public brings the par, in which case there's even more publicity, we still hold him to be blameless. Why? Because even if you were to argue that he could have asked someone, maybe there's no one around for him to ask. And therefore it's just like a person who brings a korban and there's no way for him to know whether it was properly brought before nightfall or after nightfall, because there's no way no one had a chronograph to videotape when exactly the korban was brought. Okay.
We're putting some blame on this person. He shouldn't have come maybe that late to the base.
You're right. It's not that he's totally blameless, but it doesn't rise to a level of an asham talui, where in a case where you bring an asham talui, we know that there's been an introduction of definite isser into a system. And here there hasn't. We don't know. We just don't know we don't know whether he was yotzei his obligation or not.
Are the Kohanim also, they should be supervising?
They should be. For whatever reason, there was a novice Kohen who wasn't on the ball. Okay. Amar lo ben Azai ma'ishna min hayoshe v'chulei. So remember, Ben Azai had challenged Rabbi Akiva, who had said that there is a distinction between a person who's sitting at home versus a person who's on the road. If he's sitting at home, so he has to bring a korban asham. If he's on the road, he doesn't have to bring anything. So Ben Azai said, what's the difference? It's after based and retracted, so he should have to bring in both cases. So Rabbi Akiva said to him, when he's at home, he could have asked someone. He's part of the Jewish community. But when he's on the road, there are no Jews around, so there's no one for him to talk to. So Shapir Kamalei Rabbi Akiva le Ben Azai, isn't that a good response? What would Ben Azai say to that? Why does Ben Azai still maintain his position? So Amar Rava hechzik baderech ika beinayu le Ben Azai chayev da beveisei isei le Rabbi Akiva pater da hechzik baderech. And the answer is you're right. Even Ben Azai would agree with Rabbi Akiva that when a guy is mamish out of town on the road, there's no way for him to know. So therefore, even after the retraction, he's totally pater. The machlokas between Ben Azai and Rabbi Akiva is when a guy is still at home, but he's packing his suitcase to go out on a long trip. According to Ben Azai, since he's still at home, he's chayiv. But according to Rabbi Akiva, he's chayiv to bring a korban asham. But according to Rabbi Akiva, he's totally pater in that situation as well, because even though he hasn't yet left his house, he is so engaged, so busy with packing and preparing for his trip that it's almost as if he's out of town already. Do you ever get into that mode where it's even before you go to the airport, it's like you're already out of town because you're so busy and like you don't want anyone to know where you are? Right? So that's what Rabbi Akiva's attitude. He's not communicating with anyone because he's so busy getting ready for his trip, and therefore, if he eats chaylev at that point, he's also going to be pater. Harulo based in lakor is kolaguf. Now let's go to the next part of the Mishnah, which had taught us that if Beis tells you to uproot an entire mitzvah, they are not liable to bring a par once they discover their error. Tanu rabbanan v'ne'elam davar v'lo sheye'aker hamitzvah kula. So the Brisa just elaborates, and it says that only one component of the mitzvah is uprooted, not the entire mitzvah. Keitzat, so give us the illustrations. It's really just a repeat. Amru einida b'torah ein Shabbos b'torah navodas chavim b'torah yachol yehu chayavin tamalamer v'ne'elam davar v'lo shetisalei mitzvah kula. So therefore, hare elu petur. So if they tell you there's no more nida, there's no more Shabbos, there's no more avodah zarah, so you might think that they're liable. So the answer is no. It says v'ne'elam davar. that only when one item of the mitzvah is uprooted, not when the entire mitzvah is uprooted, and therefore if they uproot an entire mitzvah like Shabbos, they're going to be pater. Aval amru yesh nida b'torah aval habal shemeres yom keneged yom pater yesh Shabbos b'torah aval hamotzim mirshus hayachal mirshus harabim pater yesh avaras chachavim b'torah aval hamishtacha b'pater yachal yu b'turin tamalomer v'ne'elam davar v'lo kol haguf. But if they tell you that there's still nida, but a shomeres yom keneged yom is mutter, if they tell you there's still Shabbos, but Hotzah is mutter, if they tell you that there's still Avodah Zarah, but bowing down is okay, so you might think that in that situation, since they've only uprooted a portion of it, they should be pater. So therefore the Pasuk says, V'ne'elam davar, to tell you that they are chayiv, since they only partially uprooted it. So Omar Mar, now we're just going to analyze the disturbing language of the Braisa. Yachol yu peturin. The ibikiyum mixas ubitul mixas peturim uvakiris kolaguf peturim b'may chayavin. So the Gemara says, I don't really understand the language of the second part of this brisa. The first part of the brisa had already established that if they try to uproot an entire mitzvah, they're pater. The second part of the brisa says that if they uproot only a portion of a mitzvah, you might think that they're pater. Why would I think that they're pater? If they're already pater, I've already established that they're totally pater when they uproot an entire mitzvah. Then why would I think that they're also pater if they uproot only a portion of a mitzvah? If they're pater there and pater here, so then when would they ever be chayiv? So Tana hachi kakashale, ema davar kula milsa mashma, talmud lomar v'ne'elam davar. So no, the way you explain the brisa is like this. The first part of the brisa says that the words v'ne'elam davar means only a partial uprooting, but you're keeping the mitzvah intact. The second part of the brisa is entertaining the possibility that the words v'ne'elam davar means totally uprooting an entire mitzvah, and therefore maybe they're going to be pater when they uproot only a portion of the mitzvah, but they leave the rest of the mitzvah intact, right? And they'll only be really liable for a bull when they uproot the entire mitzvah, just the opposite of what the first part of the brisa was saying. And therefore, Talmud lomar, no, v'ne'elam davar definitively means uprooting only a portion of the mitzvah. That's where the Torah says that they have to bring the bull. Now the question is, of course, my mashma. Where do the words v'ne'elam davar imply that they're uprooting only a portion of the mitzvah, not the entire mitzvah? So Amar Ula Karibe v'ne'elam mi davar. So we're going to see several opinions. Ula says, you read the words v'ne'elam davar as v'ne'elam mi davar. Mi means from, meaning a subset of. So where's that extra mem come from? So Rashi tells us something very interesting. The mem at the end of the word v'ne'elam is adjacent to the word davar. So you could use the mem at the end of v'ne'elam and append it to the beginning of the word davar. V'ne'elam mi davar, like double the mem. Right? And that's how we would be able to read it, because the pasuk could have been rearranged in a different way. So it's arranged this way to tell you that it's from something and not the entire thing. So Chizkiya Amar Krav Yasu Achas Mikol Mitzvos Velo Kol Mitzvos. So Chizkiya says, I read it from another part of the pasuk. It says that if they do erroneously one of the mitzvos, which he reads as one of a mitzvah, meaning one component of a mitzvah. But wait a minute, mitzvos tarti mashma. But how do you read it that way? The word is mitzvot, which is in the plural. Maybe all the Torah is saying is that if they totally uproot one out of all of the mitzvos. So the Gemara answers, Amr of Nachman bar Yitzchak, mitzvos ksiv. It says mitzvos without the extra vav. Just mem tzadi vav taf, when normally it's spelled with two vavs. And the fact that it's only spelled with one vav means that you read it as mitzvah in the singular, and therefore you read it as something was removed, one thing was removed from an entire mitzvah. They uproot only a portion of the mitzvah. Rav Ashi Amar Yolif Davar Davar Mizakein Mamri Dichsiv Be Bezakein Mamri Ki Yipalei Mimecha Davar Lo Sasur Min Hadavar Asher Yagidu Lecha Yaminu Small. That we learn a Gzeira Shava, the word davar appears over here, and the word davar appears by a zakein mamre, which is one of the members of the Sanhedrin who is outvoted. He's in the minority, but he insists on instructing people to listen to him and not listen to the majority vote. So there the Torah says, do not deviate from the matter, min hadavar, that they instruct you right or left. Min hadavar means from the entirety. So from the entirety means do not deviate from a subset of the totality. And so just like over there, ma mamri min hadavar v'lo kol davar, af bahora davar v'lo kol haguf. So just like by a zakein mamri, the pasuk is talking about only a subset of the totality, so too over here, it's talking about only a subset of the totality of the mitzvah. So Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel, ein based in chayavin at shiyoru bedavar shein atzdukim modin bo, aval bedavar shatzdukim modin bo peturin. My taima zil kari beirav. So this is like a game changer. Rav Yehuda says in the name of Shmuel something that's totally, blows us out of the water. Basically what he says is, the only time the Sanhedrin will be liable to bring a bull is if they tell us to do something that is not explicitly prohibited in the Torah, in the text of the Torah. But if it's explicitly prohibited in the text of the Torah to the point where even the Tzedukim, the Sadducees who deny Torah Sheba'al Peh, acknowledge that that mitzvah exists, then if the Beis Din tells you to do it, they cannot be held liable for your violation. Why? Because they could tell you, why'd you listen to us? Open up a Chumash and you'll see. It says in the Chumash explicitly that we were wrong, so why'd you listen to us? It's only if they tell you to do something which is not explicitly prohibited by the Torah, but we know it only through Torah Sheba'al Peh. There, the Beis Din has liability because there was no way for the individuals in the community to know that they were telling us something wrong. And that's where they bear the responsibility, then they have to bring a par to atone. Now, of course, this upends everything that we've been talking about up until now. If they tell us, go ahead and eat chaylev, well, the Torah says explicitly you're not allowed to eat chaylev. So that's not a good example anymore, right?
How do you know which is chaylev? It's not in the Torah.
So it could be. Maybe the Beis Din says the Isser of chaylev still exists, but this particular chaylev, like we learned yesterday, there's chaylev around the intestine. So we don't know whether that chaylev is explicitly prohibited by the Torah, and they say, go ahead, you could eat the chaylev by the intestine, as long as you don't eat the chaylev by the kidneys, right? So it could be that that's what we would be talking about. So we'll see, we're going to have to work it out through all of the examples in our Mishnah now.
We also have an equally strong makor not to go against the chachamim from the Torah too. So we're weighing them, it's like one saying about which chaylev, since we're not allowed to go against the chachamim, that's also a deraisa makor.
Yeah, exactly. But
right.
that's the point. That's why they have to bear responsibility, because there was no way for us,
Right, for us, we're saying
to independently come to a contrary decision. Okay, so Tanan. Now let's look at our Mishnah and subject it to the test of what Shmuel has just taught us. Yesh nida b'torah aval abal shemeres yom keneged yom pater v'amai shemeres yom keneged yom ksiv v'safrala melamed shesoferes echad le'echad. Now, the example that the Mishnah had given where the Beis Din uproots a portion of a mitzvah is like by Hilchas Nida, they tell me that I can be intimate with a Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom. But apparently that's something that the Tzedukim acknowledge, because it does say in the Torah, V'safrala, she has to count. Now granted, the context of the Pasuk is counting 7 days, but since it says V'safrala, and those words are extraneous, we derive from there that she has to count even just 1 day, when she's a zava, when she sees in the abnormal period of time. And apparently that's something that the Tzedukim also acknowledge. So the question is, where's the absence from Chumash that Shmuel says is necessary? So the Gemara answers, the Amri ha'ara asharia, Gemar biyahu da asira. So the answer is that they tell us, no. They say that it's permitted to have a partial insertion of the male organ into such a woman, and the only thing that's forbidden is to have a full insertion, right? So that's not explicit. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute, hanamiksiv es mekora he'era. But by the laws of Nida, it says that he has done he'era with the Nida. And the word he'era, that verb implies even a partial insertion. So that is explicit. So the Amri, kedarka asira shalo kedarka sharia. Okay, so let me modify that. They don't talk about the level of insertion. They talk about whether it's frontal intercourse or anal intercourse. And the only thing that's explicit is frontal intercourse, but anal intercourse is not explicit, and that's what they say is permitted. But haksiv mishkevei isha. But that too is explicit, and at least it's explicit enough because the Torah uses a plural when it talks about the prohibition of intimacy with a woman who's usher to you. It says mishkevei in the plural, which implies both frontal and anal. So da amri kedarka aser afilu ha'ara b'shelo kedarka gomar biyahu da aser val ha'ara asharya. All right, so we have to put this all together. What they do is they basically say that frontal intercourse is prohibited even with partial insertion. But anal intercourse, where the Torah does not use the verb he'era, that's permitted with partial insertion. It's only full insertion that's asur. And that's an error, because based on Torah Sheba'al Peh, we know that even partial insertion for anal intercourse is also asur. So frek the Gemara, ihachi afilu nidanami. 1 second, if you come up with such a complex type of description of what they've given us an instruction, then why does the Mishnah talk about a shomeres yom keneged yom? They could say that even about a regular nida, if they erroneously tell us that partial insertion in anal intercourse is mutter with a nida. That also is Torah Sheba'al Peh. So ela la'olam kedarka uda amri ha'ara bi'isha davahu dichsiva. So the answer is no, we got it wrong. Forget about frontal and anal, but rather it's got to do with simply partial insertion. They say, okay, it's explicit in the Torah that partial insertion in a nida is asur. But what's not written in the Torah is whether partial insertion in a shomeres yom keneged yom is mutter. So they erroneously paskin that it's mutter, even though, according to Torah Sheba'al Peh, that too is asur. So that's one example. Another explanation could be is that they erroneously say that a woman becomes a shomeres yom keneged yom if she bleeds during the day, but not if she bleeds at nighttime. Dichsiv kol yemei zova, as the pasuk says, during the days of her discharge, and it doesn't say the night. So therefore, they erroneously derive from that verbiage in the Torah that it's only when she bleeds during the day. Now, okay, so you've explained nida. But let's look at now the next example. Tanan, Yesh Shabbos b'Torah vol hamotzim rishus l'rishus pater. The example that we gave in the Mishnah is if they say that it's okay to carry, but everything else on Shabbos is prohibited. You can remove something from a rishus hayachid into a rishus harab. V'amai hotza haksiva. But why should that be? If you're telling me that it has to be something that's only Torah Sheba'al Peh, but that's pretty explicit, because doesn't the pasuk say in Yirmiyah, lo sotziu masami batechen, do not carry anything out of your houses. Da amri hotzahu da aser hachnasa mutter. So one answer could be is that they only say that hotza'a is aser, removing from a rishus hayachid to rishus harabim, but the opposite of carrying from a rishus harabim to rishus hayachid, which is not addressed by Sefer Yirmiyah, that they say erroneously is mutter. V'iba is ema da amri hotzahu da asira, but moshe v'zorek shari. Another example could be is that they acknowledge that hotzah is aser, but if I'm standing in rishus hayachid and I pass something to someone else in rishus harabim, they say that that's not a problem, that's not aser, and that from Torah Sheba'al Peh we know is aser. Or if I throw something from a rishus hayachid to rishus harabim, that's also not explicit. That's also Torah Sheba'al Peh. Okay, let's go to the third example. Yesh avodas kol chavim b'Torah, aval hamishtacha ve'pater. Va'amai hamishtacha haksiva d'chsiv lo sishtacha le'el acher. Why is avodah zarah if they tell you that it's okay to bow, right? And according to you, it's got to be Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's not Torah Sheba'al Peh. That's explicit. The Torah says, do not bow to foreign gods. So ki asira da amri ki asiri ishtachava kedarka vol shelo kedarka sharya. So one answer could be is that they say it's only prohibited to bow down to idols that are normally bowed down to. But if there's a type of avodah zarah that normally is not worshipped through bowing, such as Baal Peor and Markolis, which we've learned about in the last Maseches, they tell you erroneously that it's permitted to bow down. That's the Torah Sheba'al Peh. V'iba yisema da amri ishtachava gufa kedarkahu da asr the isba pishit yadayim v'raglayim ha'ishtachava da lesbi pishit yadayim v'raglayim sharya. Another answer could be is that they tell you only full-blown bowing, full prostration, which is stretching out your arms and your legs so that you're totally prostrate on the ground. But let's say just kneeling down before the avodah zarah, they tell you is okay, and that's an error. That's Torah Sheba'al Peh. Next, boy Rav Yosef, ein charesha b'Shabbos mahu. Mi arminan kevin de kamodu bekulu milsa kebitul mixas v'kiyu mixas dami, o dilma kevin de ka'akrayan lei lecharesha kol ikar ka'kiris guf dami. The question that he asks is like this. What if they tell you an entire malacha totally no longer exists in Hilchas Shabbos. There are only 38 malachas, not 39. So plowing is totally permitted. Now, could you say that since they acknowledge the other 38 malachos, it's like a partial uprooting, and therefore they're chayiv to bring a bull? Or could you argue that since it's an entire category of Hilchas Shabbos that they're uprooting, it's like uprooting the entire Shabbos. It's like uprooting an entire thing, and therefore they're off the hook from the par. So Tashma, yesh nida b'Torah, val abal shemeres yom keneged yom pater, v'maya akrayin l'shemeres yom keneged yom koliker. So let's look at the example that we gave in our Mishnah. If they acknowledge that the Hilchas Nida applies, but they don't acknowledge the law of Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom, they are still liable. But according to what you're saying, if they're taking an entire category of Hilchas Nida or Hilchas Shabbos, they're going to be pater. Why don't you say the same thing over here? So the Gemara answers, Amar lecha Rav Yosef Shomeres Yom Kidei Ka'amrin Kidei Shanin. So he says, no, because we've already established that they're not totally uprooting the law of Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom, but rather they're just saying that ha'ara, partial insertion, is permitted for Shomeres Yom Keneged Yom, but they're not uprooting the entire thing. Toshma, Ye Shabbos b'Torah v'lamotzi mirishus ha'yachal l'rishus ha'rabim pater v'maya ha'krayin l'hotzah kol iker. So what about the example of Shabbos, where they say there's no longer a law of hotzah? Isn't that uprooting an entire malacha? So that proves that they're still liable. The Gemara says, no, hasamnami kiddushanin. There too, what did we say? They're not completely uprooting the law of Hotzah. They still acknowledge that you're not allowed to transfer from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid, but they're saying, for example, that throwing from Rishus HaRabim to Rishus HaYachid is permitted. So that's not a total uprooting of the malacha. Tashma, yesh avodas kol chavim b'tor v'olam mishtachave pater v'may v'ha krayin lishtachava kol iker. Am mishtachava yinami kiddushanin. So the third example that we gave was bowing down to Avodah Zarah. Isn't that a total category within Avodah Zarah, and yet we still say that they're still liable? So the Gemara says, no, they're not totally uprooting an entire category, because they still acknowledge that bowing is usher, but they think erroneously that only when you're totally prostrated and your arms and legs are totally outstretched. But if, let's say, you just kneel, like we just said before, they think that that's okay. So that's not a total uprooting. And so we don't have a resolution to this question. There's no answer to this question offered by the Gemara, but we're just saying that you can't infer it from the Mishnah. Boy, Reb Zer, now we go on to the next question. Ein Shabbos b'Shvius Mahu. So what happens if the Sanhedrin paskins that in the Shemitah cycle, the laws of Shabbos apply during the 6 years of working, but during the Shemitah year, there's no longer Hilchas Shabbos. Hilchas Shabbos do not apply during the Shemitah year. So why would they make such a mistake? B'mai to. B'hadin kra b'charishu v'akasir tishbos b'zman dika charisha ika Shabbos b'zman deleka charisha leka Shabbos. The answer is because the Torah says that when there's plowing and harvesting, you should rest. So they read it as, only when it's permitted to harvest and plow am I obligated to rest on Shabbos. But if I'm not allowed to harvest and plow, so then I don't have to rest on Shabbos. That's how they would make, let's say they make such an error. Is that called completely uprooting Shabbos? Because it's on a temporary uprooting of all Shabbos? Or since it's only temporary, it's not a complete uprooting, and therefore they still have to bring the bull? And that's the question. Are they totally uprooting it? Or are they only partially uprooting it because they say that it applies during the other 6 years? So, Amar Ravina Tashma. Let's prove it from the following brisa. Navi shenis navei la'akor davar midivrei Torah chayev. So, we know that there's a halacha of a navi sheker. If a Navi comes along and he tells you to violate a mitzvah in the Torah, he shall be put to death. However, what happens if lebitul mikzas ulakiyam mikzas? What happens if he tells us only to partially violate a mitzvah, but not to completely uproot the mitzvah? Is he put to death for that? So Reb Shimon Omer, pater. Reb Shimon says, you're pater. The Navi is pater. However, that's for other mitzvahs. Let's say for kashrus, for Shabbos, or whatever. However, uva avodas kochavim, but when it comes to idolatry, afilu amar hayom ov the lamachar bat lachayev. If he tells us to worship the avodah zarah today and then to destroy it tomorrow, so he's only told us temporarily to worship avodah zarah, even though that's only a partial uprooting of the mitzvah of avodah zarah, he's still chayev misa. What do you see from there? Shma mina ein Shabbos b'shviyas kabitul mixus v'kiyum mixus dami shma mina. we see that the example of a partial uprooting of a Navi is where he temporarily suspends a mitzvah entirely. Like he temporarily suspends Avodah Zarah entirely, and he says, go worship Avodah Zarah, but tomorrow no more. So you see that since it's bound in chronology, even though for that one short period of time, he's totally uprooting an entire mitzvah, but since tomorrow he says that the mitzvah does apply, that's only a partial uprooting. And the same thing therefore applies here. Even though they say that for one whole year, laws of Shabbos don't apply, but since the other 6 years laws of Shabbos do apply, that's a partial uprooting, not a full uprooting of Shabbos, and therefore they have to bring the bull. And we'll hold it here for today. We'll do some catch-up in Mirz Hashem tomorrow. Please be prepared to stay an extra few minutes. Have a wonderful